Hi, welcome back to Computer Science E75. My name is Sid, and this is week 4 of sections. I first want to apologize for a slight confusion that I created over the email list. Sections are not from 7:30, as I mentioned. They are from 6:30. My apologies for the typo. I wanted to dive right into XML and XPath for Project 1 if you've started already, as we've talked last week. It requires you implementing a menu that we looked at from the end of the Project 1 specs. So the idea is to convert this entire menu to XML and create Pizza.ml, which will be a web-based application to access these items and add them to a cart. So the first part of today's section will be spent doing just XML stuff and XPath and trying to figure out how to use it. So let's first take a look at the XML file. I'm gonna shrink this. So the XML file today is about sushi, right? So there's going to be a lot of sushi in the examples. There's the root element is sushi, followed by the fish, and a bunch of attributes about the fish. So available or not, or origin, or where does it originate, etc. There are different variations of it. So look at also something that I want you to take note of is that the second one here has an extra attribute that the other two don't. So XML is not restricting semantically in that you don't have to have the same attributes for every single child element. So let's take a look at the first example. This looks like our XML file, right? So it says fish, the different fish, and then it's the second, and then attributes, etc. So let's take a look at how this is printed out. So if we take a look at the source, all I'm doing is I'm saying just dump the variable as you see it. So construct the simple XML object and then just dump it, which is what you see when we say when we look at this. This is exactly what it does. It just looks at it and just dumps whatever the variables are. The second example is prints out. So let me pull up the XML file so we can look at it. So let me remove these. So it basically prints out just the children's names. So it looks for each child, and then for each child it just prints out the name of the child. Let's take a look at the source for this file. Fairly straightforward. Are you comfortable with this, or do you want me to go into it? It constructs a simple XML object, so element object, so it stores it in the $XML variable, and then it says, so this is our object, so this is basically sushi followed by fish, 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 and each of these have the name attributes. So when we say XML fish as fish, so it basically takes each child, stores it in the $fish variable, and lets us access the $fish of name, and this prints a break after that. So if you take a look at the actual source of it, it's not valid HTML. All it says is tuna break, squid break, salmon break. Questions so far? Let me just make that bigger. Questions so far? All clear? Sweet. Let's go to the third one. So this is a lot prettier. It's a definite step up. It has it basically lists all the variations along with the names. So let me take a look at let's take a look at the source of this file. Let me pull it up separately. Sushi3.phps. So first constructs the simple XML object from the file, stores it under $XML. And then says, like we talked about, for each XML child fish as $fish. So it says echo fish name. So that's what we see here. So we see tuna has these variations. So it says echo fish name has these variations, break line. And then echoes is select. So if you're familiar with HTML, of the top of your head, the select command works roughly. So this is the rough structure of the select command, which is basically just a drop-down menu. So it basically constructs the same thing. So it says option value equals variation 1 of name, and then it just echoes variation 1 of name, and so on until it finally closes the select variable with a couple of break lines. Is this clear? Any questions about this? Make sense? Sweet. 4. So this appears to be doing something different. It's not really clear what it's doing, so let's just take a look at the source. First it constructs a simple XML element, right? So that's standard. It stores squid under fish name and with wasabi under variation name. And then it basically says XML expat sushi/fish whose name is $fish name. What this does, let's take a look at the expat function because I want you guys to get used to sort of looking up the PHP documentation as we go. Here we go, simple XML expat. So the first thing to note about this function, oops, too big. There we go. The first thing to note about this function is that it takes a string and returns an array. So regardless of how many elements you expect to get back, you're going to get an array of elements. So even if you're selecting, let's say these children don't exist, and you query somehow with expat for this fish, you will still get an array whose 0th element is this child. As with C, its indexing begins at 0, so this returns an array. Let's take a look at the actual query. So the query is /sushi/fish. So the XML file here is, let me close all of these. So just like with Unix file directories, /sushi is basically the home root element, and /fish, and here it says @name equals @fish name. So it's very clear what this does because here we have this name attribute which says tuna. So we basically we're saying select all of those fish whose name equals fish name, which we've specified as squid. Does that make sense so far?
Is there a way to include more than one predicate at the end of the XPath?
Is there a way? Could you give me an example?
Could you say that the name is equal to fish name and the ID is equal to 2?
Could you say? I have to look this up once. Let's just look it up. XPath, but syntax. Actually, operators is what I want. Here we go. So computes to.
There's an OR down there.
There we go. There's an OR down there. So.
Okay. Yeah.
So XPath actually is really good. It's basically a query language for everything that you would need in any query language.
So do you need to use that simple element XML thing as opposed to just a simple load that we've been using?
A question is, do you need to use the simple XML element thing instead of this? So if you actually take a look at the documentation of load, where is it? Load PHP. Is it simple XML load? Is it the function that you use?
I think so.
Yeah. So.
Simple XML load file.
Yeah. So simple XML load file. XML load file. Here we go. So what it basically does is instead of initializing it the way I've done it here, so new simple XML element, it basically loads the file. So here I'm doing get the contents. So file get contents first gets the contents of sushi.xml, and then loads that into an object. Simple XML load file basically does both of these operations in the same.
All right, so it's okay just to use, and then we can use XPath off of that.
Yes. So all that is required. So the question is whether you can use XPath off of that. All that you need in order to use XPath is for the object you call XPath on to be a simple XML element.
Okay.
So that's why if you look at the definition itself, it says simple XML element XPath, so it just belongs to that class. Questions? Okay, so that's that. So fish2. So let's go back to the this cryptic file that it prints out. Sushi4.php is what I wanted. Okay, so it prints that. It's printing something there, and then it says fish2. So fish2 is what I've just gotten. So fish2 itself is a simple XML object. It says XPath variation/variation name equals variation name. So the variation name we've specified here is with wasabi. So in the XML file, the first thing we specified was squid. So let's open this up. So keep in mind that what is stored in the array is not just string names. It's not just the name of whatever element you're at. It in fact is another like simple XML object itself. So this contains a simple XML object that is this fish. So here we have squid and tuna and whatnot. So this, when we queried for it with expat, this entire object was stored under array of 0, right? So we're treating that as the XML object now. So we're saying $fish2 expat variation / variation name. So we're querying for the variations in this file. So we're saying whatever this object, right? This object / variations, right? So we're here at this point. And then variation name equals with wasabi. Does that make sense? Once it does that, it says get that variation and then convert the price to a string and print it out. So I'm going to go over this from the beginning again, just so we can be clear, and then we'll take questions. Let me just go through once more. So first, this part is clear. So load basically simple XML load file into this object. First, just store these in a variable just so that it's easier for us to handle. Get expat sushi fish name. So sushi is a root element. So get all the fish that have the attribute name equals squid. So that returns a simple XML object in the 0th position of the array. So if there were 3 now, the first one would be the 0th one, etc. So now store that object in fish2. So store that object in fish2, and once that's done, query that object for variations whose variation's name is variation name that we specified about. Once we get that, that's going to be, where is that? So that's going to give us this object. I'm not sure if highlighting works on that. It does not really. Yeah, it's better. So it basically gives us that object now. And that object has this child named price, which we're going to convert to a string and echo out. Questions?
Yeah, well, my question was with that, in the bracket there, the at name.
Mm-hmm.
What's the significance of the at sign?
Oh, yeah. So question is, how does the at name thing work? So let's take some XML file. So let's call the root element XML. A something. And then we say B. Actually, let's say A name equals foo. Close. And then /A, right? So basically, we have 2 A's, right? One of which has a name specified equals foo, right? So let's say we want to query. So let's think of this. Think of like a collection of books, for instance, where you're specifying the genre of the book. So I've tagged each of the book with its genre. So I want to get all the books that are about cooking. So when I query for in expat, when I query for the actual, let's say I want all the A's, all I would say is XML /A. This would be the expat string that I use to get each of these things in an array, right? So if I want all the books that are tagged with foo, I would say XML. Let me erase this. So XML A at name equals foo. This basically gives me all the A's that have this attribute equals foo. Does that make sense? Cool. Questions? Okay, so let's go back here. Let's take a look at this. Seems fairly straightforward. So it basically picks each of the children of the root node, and then picks each of its children, and then and prints out all its attributes, right? So let's take a look at the source. Here we go. So here at the, can you see that? I'm going to make that a little bigger. Okay, so the most exciting part of this file is this expat query. So it's not going through each node in sort of in a systematic. It's not saying first give me this child and then I'm going to look through all its children, etc. What it basically says is give me all the nodes in this XML file that have that are // variation, right? So // variation basically means anywhere in this file, right? So let's say I have A is my root node, close A. I have B, I have C, close C, I'm closing B, and then I have C, another C, right? So when I look for //C, it will give me both this and this. So it basically gives you all the parts of the XML file that are of that object. So basically anything that has C in it will be returned. Does that make sense?
So variations is an array itself as well?
So variations itself is an array, that's right. And so let's take a look at the XML file. So if you look at this, so it's looking for all // variation, right? So if you look at the actual file, there's a variation here, a variation here, variation here, variation here, and more variation here, etc. So it gives you all of these in an array. So it's like basically how many ever elements are in this array.
So XPath always returns an array even if there was just a single?
Exactly. So that's the key takeaway. XPath always returns an array even if there's only one object in it. And that object is obviously stored in the array of 0 elements. There's another question back there?
Oh, I was going to ask in your example there. I'm sorry, I came in late. So that query would return an array with members that are the element C?
Yeah.
Or it would return B?
It would return C. So it would basically say anything. So any tag, so any children of this form, regardless of where they are on the file, will be returned. And maybe B is stored in here in this case or whatever it might be. So it'll return just the.
Bypasses the intermediary.
It bypasses any possible so it basically looks extensively throughout the tree. So once it does, let's go back to Sushi of 5. Let me close these. Actually, let's keep that XPath operators page open. So this is actually terrible querying, but I just wanted to do this so that you can sort of see what XPath is capable of. If you take a look at the XPath operators, I guess the XPath. Okay, here we go. So this is something I think we went through over a section where this is very similar to the Unix system, right? So Unix file system. This is the current node. This is from the root node. So if you have /something, that has to be the root node. This basically talks about the previous parent, just like it would say cd ... It basically is the same thing here. So here what I have is go back to so let's take a look at this. So let me close this up. Let's work with Salmon. So first it picks all the variations. So let's say it's at this node right here. So this is the current. This is the current variation that is stored. So this returned an array. This line returned an array. So when it queried the XPath query, it returned an array. And for each of the elements in the array as $variation, it basically said variation of XPath ... /.. So where would that take us? Up to, exactly. So it's basically ... /. So just go up to. So if you take a look at this, so variation. So the previous one is here, and the one above that is not any of these, but it's the fish itself. Make sense? So once you get that, print, and the fish is fish of 0 because XPath again returns an array. So it's going to return store it in the 0th variable, and then you're just going to say echo this. So this I don't think is something I talked about, and it's worthwhile doing. So if you're at this object right here, for instance, right? If you're at this A object with the name, the way you would get at it, so let's say you have, let me give you 2 distinct examples so that, so you have A is our root element, right? And B says CSE75, right? So if your XML variable, so your tree is stored, you're at A, how you would get at B is simply by saying $XML of B. Clear so far? So something to like, if you're actually, so like this, for instance, so you're basically just saying $variation of price, right? So if your XML root is stored in $XML, the way you would get at this is B. So let's say you have A, B, name. Actually, let's do it with A itself so that it's easier. A, and then you're saying name equals CS, right? And then your B has some data. Maybe it's the same, maybe it's not. Doesn't matter. How you would get at this is basically $XML. Is this? So you would say $XML. Is that clear? So if you want to get at the attribute of an element, you would basically treat it like it's an associative array. So you would just say, give me a name of that. But if you want to get at the child element, you would use the arrow to say B. Right? So this is something I missed talking about last time. So so here, what I'm saying is first the fish. So again, terrible naming syntax. Please don't follow it. But it says first the variation is stored under a variation, and the fish is stored xplat two elements above, which is what we did. And since it returns an array, we're going to get the first element of the array. Once we've gotten the first element of the array, we're going to say echo the fish of name, which is exactly what we're doing here. So we're just saying, so echo this name, colon variation of name. So the variation is still here. So with last B or whatever the variation at that point is. And then the variation of price. And then that will just print out the price. Questions? Is it clear?
Before you cast the element to a string, do you not have to do that here because of the echo?
Do you not have to cast the element? Yes, you don't have to. And since here it's like, I'm actually not sure what happens if you cast like an actual XML object as a string. But in this case, you don't have to because it's just the element itself. And I think echo will cast it naturally as a string.
So the leaves of the tree are all stored
As
PC data?
Yeah, so I'm not sure about the exact representation, but like when you echo it out, it casts it. And since it's just like a string anyway, it's fine. Questions? Okay. So
Sorry, why do you have curly braces
why do
here?
I have curly braces here? This I believe is just for. Oh, so in PHP you can when you have. Actually, let me confirm this as section. Public _ HTML section. So I don't believe you actually need sushi5.php. So I don't think you actually need the curly braces. I believe when you're doing variables, you oops, we need the PHP file. Oh, weird. Oh, interesting. I did not know that. So I guess when you have, there's something I can look at. I'm not entirely sure why this.
You just have to concatenate. If you don't use them, you just concatenate.
Yeah, you can do that, but yes, you can do that. But I was under the impression that you could also do. Okay, so because the last string does not do that, so I'm just a little surprised that it is. But I can look into this and send the class an email and confirm that. Oh, this is something else now? Oh well, I'll debug this later. But any other questions?
So wait, is that example now broken if we go to look at
No, I will fix it immediately after section, so it will work when you take a look at it. You should be all set. Cool. Let's go back. So I wanted to go over a couple of questions that the staff list has seen multiple times so that you can sort of take a look at it. The first question was, one of the specifications in the project PDF is that you cannot display all your menu categories on the same page, right? So there are a couple of different ways of doing this. One is to create, for each category, create something called pizza.php, or like for every basic category. But that does not work, because the moment you add another category in your XML file, that will break. Because you need a pizza. So if you create yourself sort of category specific pages, it's not really extensible, because they're probably going to add more categories or maybe delete a category, and you don't want your page to be category specific.
I did it exactly that way. You get it in categories.
Yeah, right. You will. The question is, you will get it. You will definitely get it. But if I add another category, where would that be printed though?
It would go in another PHP file.
Right, but you don't want them to. So you don't want them creating PHP files in order to display more categories. Right, because so the menu, the people who have access to the menu don't know PHP. Let's treat them that way. All they're going to be able to do is change stuff in the XML file.
Exactly.
So without an actual, let's say you add a category for, I don't know, appetizers, right? When you add that category, you need a corresponding appetizers.php page, right?
Right.
Right, which does not work because unless you create, so the idea is to remove that part of it and sort of make it dynamic to fully extensible.
Create that on the fly.
Well, you can create the page on the fly.
Yeah.
How would you create the page on the fly?
I sent you my code.
We can talk about this later, but you can't create an entire new page. So what the way to solve this problem is to treat it like this. So all you need is an actual category.php page. So once you have this page, you can pass it the name of a category. And that will basically grab the variable from $_get, and basically query your XML file, et cetera, et cetera. And when you're in your actual home page or whatever, however you choose to design it, these links will basically point to pizza.category. And these can also be dynamically generated because you can take a look at your XML file. For each category, all you have to do is say print category.php. So you'll have like an ahref around each text for printing it out. But you'll say php name equals whatever variable you're using of category. Does that make sense?
Now, in your XML file, you could have included something at the very, like when somebody adds a new category, the first thing they can have in the XML is the name of the PHP file that's going to be automatically created.
Sure. So right. So I think I still am not entirely sure how this would work, but we can talk about that after class.
It's the same principle as this. It just
Okay. Well, we can figure this out right after. Any other? So do you guys see how this works? So the basic idea is to say, I'm going to have one single page. So for this, we need to set up a few things. So this is your home page. I'm going to move this side. So you have different categories linked here, right? So the first thing you need for people to be able to do is to get to these links. Here in your XML file, you have all these categories here, right? So you have all of them here. Basically, you look through them. For each of the names, you basically print out category.php question mark name equals whatever the name of that thing you saw there. And in your category.php page, which we will sort of link to this way, the moment you see a get variable, you will have to just print out the elements in that menu. That makes sense? I see a little confused faces here.
The only thing I'm confused about is why, whether that's a part of the specification of the project for pedagogical reasons to make us do this, or whether it's for security reasons.
So the question is it for sure. So the question is why exactly would you want to do it this way? Exactly for the reason I gave you. Like if I add a new category, maybe there's another way. I'm not entirely sure how that would go about. But the moment I add another category, you should not have to add another page that prints the menus of that category.
I guess what I mean is, why would you ever want a menu that is on multiple pages?
Oh, so one of the specifications on the project is to have, let's see, so here we go. So you must not display 3 aces menu on one huge page. Can you read that? Okay. But rather allow customers to browse the menu by category. I guess just for ease of browsing, and that I think makes sense especially because the menu is so large. Oops, where is the menu? Especially since the menu is so large, having a giant giant page, I think, is not.
If you implemented that way of displaying categories, how would you put multiple categories on one page?
If you implemented this, how would you put multiple categories? That's a little tricky. So you'd have to be smart about looking at your get variables and figuring out how to print them, right? But not necessary because you can just do one category per page. And since there are sufficient elements, it won't look bad either. Any questions here? I'm going to do a few examples around this, and maybe that'll become clearer. So under online, basically we have a mini version of the project. So main, so view cart, your cart is empty, go back to main. Pizzas, select something, it says something, so I'm going to view cart again. This is my cart. I'm going to clear my cart, and I'm going to view cart again. So a lot of like the infrastructure, like sort of logistics around the project is available here. So let's take a look at the source. Oops, let's come back to that actually. Let's go here. Oof. Okay, I just have to. Okay, so I guess we're just going to have to look through each page's source by itself. So let's start with main, index.phps. So, so this is exactly what I was talking about. So first you get the contents of the store.xml file, and then query expat for all the categories, right? So you're going to say, give me all the categories. Let's take a look at the XML file so that you have an idea of how this looks. So it's store.xml. So this is how the XML file looks, right? So we have the category name. This is a poor schema. Like it's poor by choice because we want you to like figure out what works and what does not. Price size equals small, large, etc. All of them have small and large. There's a description about some of the items, and then more stuff. And each category is sort of in its own. So let's actually shrink this so that you will see. We don't care about the address. We do care about the menu. So let's shrink the items here. So we're querying for expat, which will give us all the categories. So it'll just give us each of these elements in an array. So once that is done, it says, so require runs begin.php, end.php. These are basically this is another very good way to like prevent code duplication. So now that you know PHP, instead of having to write the sort of HTML head, et cetera, on every one of your pages, what you can do is basically store that in a file and just require it. So once you require it, it basically will just print that out, which means you will be you don't have to like write that. That removes a lot of code out of your page.
So by itself, it's not a conforming HTML document, but when you put it all
exactly
together,
by itself, right? By itself, it's not. But when you say, because none of these PHP files will actually be seen. So when you look at the actual index.php, when you take a look at the actual file, you see like an HTML document that's complete, has the header, has the etc. So the part that we're filling in is, if you take a look, is after this. So it's about here, right? So so here first we're saying for each of these categories as category, right? This is exactly what I talked about here. So category.php get category equals print category of name. Does it make sense? Makes sense? So for each of the categories, I'm just going to look through it and sort of link to it. So when you take a look at where it's embedded, it's in an Ahref. Once I do this, I'm going to print the actual category name itself because I want to take a look at it and be like, oh, so pizzas, right? So if you take a look